So here is how to change a window screen. Anytime you find window screens that are getting kind of old and scraggly, like this one here, kind of start breaking apart at the edges, and they start to weaken. You can see a multi-coloration here. This is actually fiberglass, and the fiberglass actually gets exposed to the sun or the weather and changes color. So changing the screens are actually pretty easy. I'm going to show you how to do that. And keep in mind, you can also look online. You can measure these and buy complete window screens, replacement screens, if you want to do that as well. But I'm going to show you how to replace the screen. First, start with these little fasteners that hold the screen in. First, release these. So every screen has 4, typically. 1, 2, 3, 4, and some screens come with 1 at the bottom. So you want to open these up. Sometimes they get kind of stuck, so do your best to open these all up. Some of them get stuck. Just pull them out the best you can, and that's how you get the screen out. Now some windows, including this one here, oh no, not this one. Some of them come with a pin at the top or a connector at the top, but this one does not. And the middle braces are very delicate, so you don't want to pull these too hard. But you basically pull up the screen once these fasteners are all out. Pull it up and pull out the screen. And be careful, because sometimes you lose these. So hang on to these. I'll show you how to put those in later. They slip right back in there, but just put them down on the windowsill. Keep them handy. So now we're good to go. So we can grab the screen. So how to repair window screens and why repair window screens. In this case here, we had some glue that we spilled on it, and there are these holes growing. So what happens after some time is that the rain, the acidic rain, gets to the screen and really it just makes it really weak. So this particular screen we need to replace because there's little patches of holes all over it. So I'll show you how to do it. So the primary things you're going to need to replace your window screens are a small screwdriver, because that's going to allow you to get in here and take the piping out, little pieces of plastic, which I'll show you in a second. You need a cutter tool. A pair of scissors actually does fine. You're going to need a screen tool, which is a very cheap tool to get, which I'll show you how to use. And sometimes a multi-use tool too, because that actually helps get these things out as well. So you might not need the small screwdriver. You can actually use the multi-tool. You're also going to need, obviously, a replacement screen. I prefer fiberglass over aluminum. Sometimes you want the hard aluminum screening. For pets especially, you could actually buy pet-proof screening so that your dog can't run through it. But this is fiberglass. It's very soft and very flexible, and it lasts a long time. I mean, this is fiberglass, and it's lasted about 23 years. So it's actually pretty easy to install. So that's the screen, and then you're going to need the retainer spline, it's called. And it comes in different sizes. You see here, this is 0.155 in diameter. It is about 25 feet. So you measure, the length of your screen by the width, and you put that all together. I mean, typically in one bag, you have enough to do one screen. There's usually some left over for a smaller window if you want to hang on to it. Another important tool, be very careful with this, is a razor blade or some kind of a cutting tool, but preferably a really good sharp razor blade. Be super careful though, because these things can really cause damage if you cut your finger, so be careful. And what you want to do first, the first step, is to remove the old spline. So you get a multi-use tool like this, and you get in there. And you have to be careful because some screens like this has a plastic edge on it. It's kind of worn out, but it's plastic. You could chip that, so you want to be careful about that. So you take your multi-tool and you carefully get in here and you try to pry it out like so. And again, you don't want to scratch this. You want to be careful not to scratch that. So this is the old spline, and see it's kind of worn out. You just basically pull that out. Pull it out all around your screen. Carefully. You don't want to do any damage to the metal edge. So what I do before I go to the hardware store is, after I take the spline out, I'll have a piece of it and I can bring it with me to the hardware store. That way you can match it up so that you get the right size spline. In this case here again, approximately 0.155. The newer stuff here comes with ridges, and it's usually hollow in the center here, which allows it to kind of squish in place. Because the idea here is that when you put the screen in, you put the spline in, the spline squishes in this cavern right here and holds the screen in. So we put our trashy old spline over here. Now we can start taking the screen out. Make sure that you get it all out, because sometimes it sits inside of the channel. So we want to make sure to get this all out. Just pull it right out of the screen. And be careful here too, because you have in the center of the screen this center brace right here. It's on a little metal track. It just kind of sits in place. Now most windows have little markers on there when the builders put this in. It's the center point of your window. If you don't have that, I recommend taking a pencil or even your multi-tool or whatever, and making yourself a little mark exactly in the center there. Very, very teeny mark. You don't want it to look ugly. But that'll ensure that when this comes off, which it will, that we can center it up and make sure that it's aligned. So when you're looking at the window, it's nice and centered. When you're pulling the screen out, be careful, because sometimes it comes apart like it just did here, which is okay. You don't want to break any pieces, but we just basically stick this back together here. There goes the centerpiece I was talking about. That's okay, because again, you have this little piece here. We have our center line right here. And we take the center channel. So I'm going to put that back in place. So again, you have this little teeny piece here, and that goes right in there. Sits right back in the groove. Put that into position. There. Make sure that it's nice and centered on both sides. Another good thing to do is when you have the frame taken apart is to inspect it, because if you have a miscoloration or it needs to be repainted in any way, you just kind of take a look at it and you can touch it up with some white paint. This one's pretty clean, so we really don't have to do much with that. Okay, so the next thing is make sure that your channels are up. They're facing up all the way around, and you're going to take your new screen and you're basically going to lay it in position. And you're basically just going to roll it right over the whole frame, like so. You want it straight, not angled. You want to keep it straight. And that's important because if you look up closely, the lines of the screen, if they're angled, it'll be crooked. So you want to line that up nice and straight as best you can. So we're going to start with that. One important tip too is to make sure you're doing it on a flat surface. Doing it here on a driveway, so it's a nice hard flat surface. That way the screen lays out nice and even, nice and flat, and you don't have any weird bubbles or edges. So next what I do is I take this spline, the new spline, and I'm going to measure across from this edge to this edge, and I'm going to cut a piece out. I'm going to cut it right at the edge here. We're going to place it right there because we're going to need room over here to go down this way. So I'm going to cut that down to the edge here. And it's important not to stretch it either. Don't pull it. Just make it exactly the right length and cut it, and then sort of push that down with your finger. You're going to go right across. I'm going to use the tool in a second, but I'm going to roughly put this into position right across the channel. Might be hard to push in there at first. We only want to do it temporarily, and I'll show you why. Okay, this is the tool, the special tool for screen installation tool, and it comes with two sides. One side you're going to see is kind of flat or rounded edge. Okay, that's for getting into smaller spaces, and then the other side here has kind of a groove in it. And what's nice about this groove is that it'll ride, kind of like riding on a railroad, right on the rail or whatever. So that's the side I want to use here because it's kind of thick. So I put this piece in position, roughly like so, and I'm going to take this pronged wheel, or this fanned out wheel, if you will, and we're going to put that right on top of there, right on top of the spline, and we're going to push down. And see, it pushes it right inside of the channel. And what I do is I sort of push down making my way across a little bit at a time. It's kind of hard to get in there sometimes, but you just press all the way across and then roll this right across, pushing down all the way to the end, like so. Now, if it's sticking up anywhere, you take the other side, the smooth side, and you kind of roll over it, give it a little push down. But the key here is to be really gentle, because if you push too hard with this wheel, and you'll hit the edge of this screen. So you can see here where I started it earlier, and I actually made a very slight, a very, very slight cut. And that's from pushing down too hard. So don't push down too hard, go nice and gentle. It's just enough to get it inside the groove. That's all you need to do, is just push it in there. So now that's holding it down on one side of the screen. So now I'm gonna stretch it across the other side and do the same thing to the other end. Now I move over to this side, and what you do is you pull the screen taut, but not too tight. You just give it a little bit of a pull. Use the roll here and kind of pull to the edge. And then I cut another piece of spline here, and I'm going to press it in to hold it into position here, and gently push it in just to hold it in place. What I do now is I use the end of the roll and I use my knees. I kind of stand on here to make sure that it's tight. But again, it doesn't have to be super tight, because believe it or not, when you push it in the grooves, it actually tightens up the screen as well. So just enough to hold it in position, and I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other side, where I'm going to put this in the track, and I'm going to use my special wheel, again, using this side with the channel, and I'm going to zip right across, but not push down too strongly, and I'm going to fill this side in. And once it's put in all the way on the edge, remember, you can take the smooth part of the wheel here, and go back over it, and just press in gently where you want to fill it in. Right there, it's sticking up a little bit. There we go. So you want to go just under the surface with it here. Remember, gentle. Gentle, 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 because you don't want to cut that edge. You just want to go nice and gentle, firm enough to push that right in the channel all the way down. Then you take your cutter tool and you're going to cut it right before the end there. Going to push that in. Oop, there you are. Very gently. Go right in there. There. Perfect. So you have a nice end. So this side is holding that side compressed. So now it's pretty taut that way. So now we're going to work on the verticals going up and down. Now I cut the spline for the verticals. So I have one for this side and one for that side. So just like we did it at the tops and the bottoms, the horizontals, we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to make sure that we're lined up as best we can. Keep it flat on the ground, and we're going to start this edge here. We'll line it up as best we can and gently press that in all the way across. If it is a little wide and tough to get in, you can give this a little bit of a stretch, because that's going to help stretch it out so that it gets in the channel. And then you can use your multi-tool here, or your screen tool that is, to press it inside the grooves. Just a gentle tug though, not too much. So again, gently pushing it in the groove as you're stretching it out. And when you get to the end, don't push too hard, you don't want to cut it. We're going to hold back here, and we're going to trim it right at the end here. And once that's trimmed, we're going to put that right into position here. And then again, you're going to take this soft, smooth side here and gently go over it. And sometimes what I like to do, instead of grabbing it here with a tool and, roughing it, just get up close with it. Don't pinch your fingers, but get up close with it with your fingers and kind of go gently like this. And just go gently along the channel. Make sure that it's pressed in there nice, but not too hard. Again, you don't want to cut it. Just make sure that it's in there. So now we have this side done. This complete vertical, completely done. It's all pressed in there. And remember, this center bar, the center support bar, is on the center line. You can see that mark that we made, so it's lined up there. So now we jump over to that side. Let's make sure that the center bar is okay over there. Okay, so now we're on this side here. Same thing. We're going to pull it, but gently, just gently with your knees. You don't have to go too taut. Just make sure that this is pushed away from you as much as possible and your knees are supporting it. And just make sure that there's no buckles in it. Just make sure it's nice and smooth all the way across. That's all. Just make sure it's smooth. And we're going to start this end here. I'm going to hand put this into position to get us started. Maybe take this edge tool here, this roller, and pack that right in the corner there. Just so you make sure the corner is nice and secure and flat. Make sure the whole corner is done too. There. Make sure it's really held in there. So again, using the channel wheel, we'll work our way across, putting it right inside of the groove, all the way to the end here. And we're going to make a cut right before the end, and then pack that right in place. Make sure the corner is nice and snug, and then use the smooth end, again, so you don't cut it. We're going to use this to put that inside the corner, and then double check it, going right across. Right across, nice and easy. Nice and easy. There. So what happens is when you push it in the grooves, it actually pushes down about, I don't know, almost 1/8 of an inch, and it gives it a nice tight screen feel here. So this is actually very, very tight after doing that. So that's that step. So the last step, again, is using this very, very carefully as we're going to start cutting off the screening. So you can cut off the excess if you want to, but what you want to do is get in tight here, and you can cut it on this edge here. I like to kind of angle this. This is kind of tricky, but once you get started, it's not that bad. But what I like to do is go, see if I can get in here, yeah, right on that edge here, and start cutting. That way you don't have any leftovers. So I'll show you what I mean. So let's say we decide to cut it here, like so here. Then we're going to have this leftover edge. This leftover edge or flap or whatever. So that's why I personally, I mean, you can do that if you're more comfortable with that, but I like to get in there and try to get it as close as I can to the inside edge as possible. And go right along the groove with that, just like that. Because if you look at it, the razor actually lays right on the edge here, which is perfect. So when you're cutting, you just sort of let it rest and cut right across the groove here, and it comes right off. So it's a nice, clean cut. And again, just resting this along the edge. Be careful you don't slice it, because there's nothing worse than oops, and then you got to redo it again. So be very, very, very careful here. But rest it on the edge and just go right across. And that's pretty much it, because when you go around all of the edges, it comes up nice and clean. So you really don't have much. You may have little ends here that you want to pick off with your razor, and especially in the corners. You want to be extra careful here, and just take your razor blade and just sort of clean up around the corner edge. Take your time, be patient. So that's pretty much it. So once you do that, you just sort of look it all over. I like to stand it up, make sure there's no ripples. Because remember, one thing is that you can always take this out, the spline back out, and fix edges if you need to. In this case here, it came out pretty nice. Nice and taut. Everything looks like it's in good shape. Check both sides. If for some reason your centerpiece here is off, you can still slide that. You can actually slide that. If you have trouble sliding it, you can loosen the spline on the other side, and that'll give you more leeway. But that's pretty much it. That's all there really is to it about fixing a screen.